UCLA must emphasize recruiting in its new head coaching search.
You are Locked On UCLA, your daily podcast on the UCLA Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to this edition of the Locked On UCLA podcast. I'm your host, Zach Anderson Yoxheimer. Thanks for making this show your first listen each and every day. It's free wherever it's your podcast, and it's available on YouTube. Like, comment, subscribe, download. Thanks for joining today. Welcome back, every dayers. We're joined in this show today by Steve Wiltfong, who knows everything recruiting, Vice President at Rivals. Steve, thanks for joining the show.
No, absolutely a pleasure. A lot of change out there in Westwood, Zach.
A lot of change, and this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. If you're a new customer, you can bet just $5, and if your first bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the app today. And what we're talking about is UCLA recruiting and the impact from what happened with the Deshaun Foster firing to what the new coach needs to bring. Steve, what does UCLA need to do in the recruiting from now until the new head coach is fired and beyond?
Well, I think right now recruiting is at a standstill for the most part. Obviously, you got in the modern recruiting era, there are some prospects that have maybe agreed to some financial packages that under whatever circumstances keep them in the fold right now. So you maintain those things, but recruiting is completely on the back burner till you have a head football coach. And I think the next guy that UCLA hires has to be someone that immerses themselves in talent acquisition and has their thumb on it, because UCLA to me is a program that I view as one that is a developmental program more than one that's going to go out there and land 15 to 20 blue chippers each cycle. Now, I think UCLA is capable of landing Rivals 300 recruits, but the culture, the core at its core is finding high upside guys with traits and then putting them in a program that has great scheme, great player development, great strength and conditioning, and brings the best out of their players. You look at a place like Illinois right now, ranked in the top 10. That is a roster of hard-nosed kids that they scheme correctly. They've had some good wins in the transfer portal. So they've landed some key area blue chippers, and they bring it all together and they maximize that roster, and they have the college football playoff in their sights. They beat South Carolina to end the season. And I think that's the recipe for UCLA. You know, across the street at USC, they're going to recruit 25 blue chippers, but that doesn't guarantee you success. I mean, football there's a lot of moving parts. And if you have a head coach that is in complete control of the program, understands who they're taking on the high school ranks, the portal ranks, how they fit, and then knows how to get the best out of them, has good strength and conditioning, great scheming. Look, there's a lot of moving parts. It is hard to win from week to week. UCLA fans certainly know that after watching the first 3 weeks of the season, losing the teams that are less talented than the Bruins. That's why you made the coaching change. You're losing the teams that are less talented than you. Good kudos to UCLA. Now it is time to get the right guy in the corner office that's going to bring a competitive edge, that's going to bring a schematic edge, that is going to be very involved, or make sure they're at least the people that are in charge of it. And then they answer to the corner office of taking the right guys that fit what they're trying to do on offense and defense, that fit the culture, that are going to bring the right mindset, and then get going and competing, because the Big Ten is the best conference in college football right now. It's better than the SEC, and it's kind of similar. Like you see the change they made at Purdue. They brought in Coach Odom. You can see the shift in culture and philosophy. They're light years better than they were last year. They might not win another game, but you can see the step forward for Purdue this year. And UCLA, they just need someone in that office, in that corner office, that's going to have, who's in charge, and everybody else follows, has a presence.
And the big thing is what Deshaun was trying to establish before, obviously, he was fired, especially in this 26 class, was more of a national footprint. Do you think UCLA needs to expand, keep going back into Florida, to Massachusetts, to Texas? Or is it really just based in their own backyard where there's so many talented guys, whether they're the blue chip guys or not? Is it just an LA-based thing, or should they expand with their new Big Ten footprint?
Well, I thought UCLA, before Coach Foster was let go on the recruiting trail, they were doing a nice job at the point of attack, particularly recruiting on both sides of the ball. And that's going to be the foundation of any program. I think for UCLA and in any program right now, you can recruit nationally because it's so easy to evaluate film through all the services that these schools purchase. And it's easy to start building a relationship with kids through FaceTime and all the technology that allows you to connect with student athletes. There's a lot of good football players out there, and it's more about honing in on the right ones. And so where are you going to have the most success? I mean, certainly I think closer to home, you're always going to have the most success than going into talent-rich states, Texas, Florida, Georgia, Alabama, places like that where you can unearth, where places where state you can't take everybody, but there's enough good players and they fit what you're trying to do, and you can develop them and maximize them and get the best out of them. Go into the transfer portal. You got to have money for the portal. So whoever the next head coach is, and I know there's rev sharing and everything, but making sure you have a good plan to spend in the portal and be competitive in the portal and go from there.
Do you think from what UCLA's had recently, they had a lot of success with Foster kind of building before he was let go? Do they have that money and rev share to compete from what you've heard, what you've seen from recruits and how they've interacted with UCLA this recent cycle before all the decommits?
Well, the only thing we truly know about Coach Foster is the product that we saw on the field. Yes, we saw that they were recruiting some decent players nationally, but the players that were on the roster weren't being maximized. And that's why you're 0-3. And so we can sit here and say, well, you landed Johnny Jones from Florida, but what does that mean if Johnny Jones isn't a great player at UCLA? So you need to get a coach in there that can develop your players and scheme them up correctly. And UCLA was struggling to do that. And so now you go out and you hire a coach, in my opinion, that has a track record of getting the best out of their players. And so someone that's going to bring great energy to your program, someone that's going to give you a competitive edge on the trail, in the portal, on the football field.
For me, I've got a couple of names for you. I'm going to kind of ask based on not maybe their coaching, but more their, recruiting aspects. What do you know about the names of Tony White, Will Stein? Of course, Danton Lynn's been thrown out there. Those are three coordinators who could potentially be head coaching fits with UCLA one way or another, from Florida State to USC to Oregon. Which of those three that I mentioned are the best recruiters from what you've known?
Well, I think all three would be exciting hires at UCLA, what they've done. I mean, you look at Tony White, he went down to a Florida State football team that was 2-10 last year, couldn't stop anybody. They destroy Alabama in week one, just completely out-physicaled, out-toughed them on all sides of the ball. Did a fantastic job there. You can see the fast turnaround at Florida State. Coach Will Stein is obviously one of the best offensive minds in the country, working under Dan Lanning. He's got a front row seat of how the recruiting operation, the transfer portal operate. They are a well-oiled machine at Oregon. And I know people will say, oh, well, they got Phil Knight's money, Oregon dollars. They can do what they want. Look, just because you can land most of the people you're going after, you have to make sure you're selecting the right guys that keep you competitive. And that's easier said than done. Like, look at Florida State last year, and so they had to make some coaching changes. Dan Lanning, the history of his career at Georgia, Alabama, and now in the corner office at Oregon. You got Will Stein, who did a great job at UTSA, has done a great job at Oregon. But I think he understands how a program's supposed to be run at a high level. Oregon was good enough to win the national championship last year. It's very hard to win the last game, but I think they certainly showed that they were good enough to do it, and they're in that conversation again this year and will be for years to come. Coach Stein's got a lot to do with that. He helps recruit at a high level, but more than anything, he takes his players and they put them in position to make a lot of plays on offense. And that's the name of the game. And recruiting is not about who you don't get. It's about who you do get and then getting the best out of them within your program. And so, and then Deonton Lynn, what he did at UCLA and how he's helping USC turn the corner defensively. He's obviously one of the brightest defensive minds in college football. Again, maximizes his hand and getting the best out of his players. And from a recruiting standpoint, I don't know if he he's someone that does a great job when kids are on campus. Tony White and Will Stein are guys that I hear more from just the day-to-day standpoint of, they're locked in with their top targets and talking with them and their families and their circle of trust often. I know that when recruits are on campus with Deontin Lynn, they're blown away. They know that when they talk to him, he's going to get the best out of them, and they feel very comfortable going to play for him after they sit down and talk to him.
Next, we're going to talk about the stability of the UCLA program and, some areas of need. And clearly it's in the trenches. We'll discuss that next on Locked On UCLA. Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. Mazda delivers the confidence with every ride with more IIH top safety picks than anybody else. Literally, from footwork to breathwork, athletes sweat all the details. And Mazda brings the same intention to how they craft every model. You can make everyday drives feel anything but, from smooth handling to intuitive controls. Think about Mazda. Like our players, we sweat every detail, but because we make you move, every single move counts. Impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved. It's almost the weekend. Time to look back and crown this week's MVP on Who Delivered, powered by DoorDash. Just like you can win every Saturday with DoorDash streaks, saving more every time you order, these players delivered when it mattered most. Let's break it down. For the UCLA Bruins, I would say Anthony Woods delivered in a big way. He's been working his way up in the lineup, getting the starting snaps in that game against New Mexico. And when the pressure is on, Anthony Woods came through. No hesitation, no delay. And been watching week after week, that performance wasn't a fluke. Anthony Woods is on a streak. And just like Woods for the UCLA Bruins, DoorDash delivers your Saturdays with DoorDash streaks. You can save on every Saturday you order, stack it up all season. You can save up to $250, including $100 in DoorDash credits. Order this Saturday. Keep the streak going. Fuel your game day. Only with DoorDash. Terms apply as the promo period is available through November 18th. The stability of the UCLA program, that's the thing in question. You go from Chip Kelly, you let him walk away, and then you went to Sean Foster, who for all intents and purposes maybe wasn't the right hire, clearly wasn't the right hire. What did you see, Steve, maybe when you visited UCLA, what you've seen and heard from recruits or the players, that was he the guy or is he clearly the wrong guy from the start?
Look, and maybe he could have proved everybody wrong if he would have got more time in Westwood. But the time I spent around him, I didn't see the same presence that I would see with other top head football coaches in the sport. You go and visit Indiana last year before Curt Cignetti coached his first game, and you clearly know who is in charge, and you feel great about where the way the ship is headed. Then you visit UCLA, and there just wasn't the same presence, the same juice, the same energy. And so for UCLA, they need a coach that's coming in as the alpha, the compass of this program, that is going to get the best out of the staff, the coaches, and the players, that has a clear plan, a message for the day, message for the month, message for the season. Everything's on time, staying on top of strength and conditioning, nutrition, recruiting, transfer portal, scheme, staying ahead of the curve on scheme, making sure you're tough to play against, making sure the kids are playing with the right effort and attitude. And when you're around Curt Cignetti, it doesn't take you very long to know why he's been successful historically. And people say, well, Indiana didn't have a great schedule. Look, man, you just lost to New Mexico. All right.
Got destroyed by New Mexico.
Curt Cignetti would never lose to New Mexico. He could walk in and coach UCLA that week and beat New Mexico. And so there are a lot of great coaches out there. You got to make sure you find one.
Is there that type Curt Cignetti that you think that's out there UCLA could get, that's arrogant, that maybe is waiting around in the Conference USAs, the Mountain Wests, whether they go to Eck or Dan Mullen, or do they need more of the real loud, arrogant Curt Cignetti? What's a name that comes to mind that's a head coach right now?
Well, first of all, I don't know if arrogant's the right word. I think confident. And I think his players, I think people like being around him, that work with him, that coach with him, that play for him. He is just confident. And that goes, and that attitude funnels down to his coaches and his team. And so they play at a high level. And he doesn't care if he hangs 76 on you on Saturday It's your job to stop them from it's all internal. What are we doing to get Indiana better? And there's, I think when you look at the UCLA hot board and you see a lot of coordinators on there, and that also includes Tosh Lupoy, Oregon's defensive coordinator, there's some exciting options out there for UCLA, and it'll be interesting to see who they settle in on.
The big thing is UCLA needs stability. Does that lack of stability, you think, scare anybody away from the job, scare away recruits? You see Chip Kelly just walk away. You see Deshaun Foster fired after the shortest tenure ever. Is that stability a question, or is that just how important this next hire is for everything involved?
No, I think it's up to the athletic director to create an environment where the next coach is comfortable to be able to come in and have the time to turn this program around, and more than anything, have the support. I think for Coach Cignetti, since we were talking about him, it was important for him to know that Indiana, a basketball school, was going to invest in football before he got there to allow them to have the resources to be competitive in the Big Ten. And so the UCLA administration, donors, all of that, they have to synchronize and create an environment where the next head coach is confident that they have the support to win at a high level, or they're not going to be in the mix for some of these guys. The guy like Will Stein's not going to just take a job. He's going to take a job where he thinks he can win at a high level. And so he'll wait. He's that good enough a coordinator to do that. I think that would be the mindset of a Glenn Schumann, Georgia's defensive coordinator as well. So for UCLA, getting their infrastructure in order, getting the support in order, the AD, and knowing that UCLA is going to pour into the facilities and do what they can to upgrade to give the student athletes an opportunity to maximize and be the best versions of themselves.
And I think the simplest way to talk about that is UCLA had their practice field being demolished and redone at the beginning of the season. Like their own practice field was literally being redone instead of when they're not working on it. And that's just kind of the internal things that make it not work as much. So when UCLA tries to get a guy, what would you say for the Bruins, that they need, somebody who can come in and just bring all that, or just the pizzazz forward? You talked about Cignetti. Do you think they are a basketball school first, or do they have that cachet with tradition in football?
Well, I think we've seen UCLA prove that they can be successful. Chip Kelly, I know it didn't end the way it was envisioned, but 8-5, 9-4, 8-4. They were certainly winning more games than they were losing at the end of his tenure before he jumped ship. Jim Mora had some good years, some good 10-win seasons at UCLA, but historically it's been a place that's been hard to win at, and more than anything, win consistently at. But you're in LA. You have a lot of this. You have more perks to your program if you want to utilize them than a lot of programs in college football. But you have to rally the support and get your infrastructure in order to go out there and compete and decide this is going to be important to us. We're going to build the best football facilities we can buy. We're going to support these coaches. We're going to hire good coaches. We're going to pay good coaches salaries to get good coaches here to work under the head coach. And then it goes from there. And it's hard to win football games. It's hard to, there's a lot that goes into consistently winning football games.
When a recruit comes in for a weekend, they go to the Rose Bowl, they walk in, UCLA runs out of the tunnel, there's a couple thousand in a massive football stadium. Is that a huge detractor for recruits? Or is that something that some kids are like, I want to change this? Or is that something that's why they start going to the SEC or going to the other schools in the Big Ten, leaving California, and they go to fuller stadiums with more energy and more of a louder fan base and support of them, win or lose?
Well, it's going to detract. I mean, you're not going to land a lot of top 100 players without environment, atmosphere, and vibe. But if you are a coach that builds meaningful relationships with kids and you get them to believe in you, they'll believe that they can come in and help turn this thing around and turn it into a winner. I know we just keep going back to Cignetti, but Indiana is selling out their football games. At the beginning of last year, Cignetti was challenging the students and the fans to get their asses to the stadium and in the seats. And after games, after wins, early in the season against opponents that were much, group of 4 or group of 5, he was telling, hey, we're good. Come watch us play. And people were skeptical until they smashed Nebraska, And so it takes a coach to rally a community. And Cignetti has done, not only did he rally his football program, but he also rallied alum, got them to pour in and support the program. And even hearing about ticket prices for their Indiana State game, living in Indianapolis, people were like complaining at the cost all of a sudden because there's a want and demand all of a sudden to go watch Indiana football play. And UCLA, the head coach hire that they make, he needs to be as much an ambassador for UCLA football as he is the head football coach and everything else that entails.
It felt like they tried to go with they need an anti-Chip Kelly. He wasn't the loudest ambassador for UCLA football, and Deshaun Foster was a slight CEO, but as you mentioned, didn't have that presence. It's almost like you want somebody who can have the coach be, interchangeable and adapt the schemes a little bit like a Chip Kelly, but somebody like a Deshaun who realizes recruiting is important, but you need somebody to be there. Cignetti comes to Indiana, they become physical. UCLA clearly dominated on the O-line and D-lines. For this school, for UCLA, is this a job that's a rebuild, or can they really figure it out in a year to 2 years, or is this a 3-year process and the Bruins have to be patient?
Well, with the transfer portal, it allows you to rebound pretty quickly if you take the right guys out of the portal. And for Cignetti, he took a lot of guys from his old job. And, before the season, he was like, I'm glad I was able to do that. Those are some of our best players from James Madison. They were some of their best players at Indiana. And it was because of they knew how to play the game correctly. And they knew how to prepare for the game correctly. And they understood what the coaches wanted out of them. And they played with confidence and played with speed because they understood the expectation for them going into the week, going into the game. So for UCLA, Chip Kelly, he's a good football coach. Everybody knows that. But he wasn't as engaged in talent acquisition as you needed to be to win at a high level at UCLA. And then Deshaun Foster, it's not like I was paying attention to UCLA football every minute of the day, but it was clear that the football team wasn't prepared to play on Saturdays and they weren't executing at a high level, and there was no schematic advantage compared to their opponent. And so the next head coach is going to have wear a lot of hats. And that guy's out there. I don't know who it is, but it's going to start with the administration giving them the support that they need to win, or it's going to be hard to attract someone for the job in general, someone good.
I think the only thing UCLA fans think about the administration is that they put tarps in the Rose Bowl and absolutely butchered the last hire with Martin Jarman's working and getting Deshaun Foster. When it comes to working in the portal and what this UCLA roster has, clearly they have an absolute need in the trenches. O-line, D-line, that's what you need to win in the Big Ten.
You need money to get difference makers in the trenches.
And the thing is, you talk about maximizing talent. Does UCLA have that talent, or is it so bad that they have to rebuild to go get the portal, or wait for the high schoolers to get bigger and stronger?
I mean, when you look at UCLA's roster, you see guys that were sought after recruits in high school football, guys that were wanted and guys that were recruited heavy. And it just, look, those guys weren't put in the best position to win. And so the UCLA administration saw that enough and decided to make the change in season, which for me, if I'm a UCLA fan, hopefully it tells me, look, we are going to start to pour into this football program and try and bring it out of the gutter of the Big Ten. And it's really one of the worst it's really one of the worst Power Four teams in the country right now if you go through the first 3 weeks of the season. So that's what you're dealing with. That's what you're trying to dig out of. And so starts with community support. Who wants to invest? Who's bought into helping bring this football team up and garnering support from alum and people that can be difference makers for your program off the field, and then going out there and getting a head coach to believe in that.
We'll talk next about quarterbacks. We'll talk maybe biggest name recruit that they can try to keep, and can they recover this 2026 recruiting class in a short window after they eventually hire a head coach? We'll talk about that next on Locked On UCLA. Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, investments, and when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there is Monarch Money, an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or on your phone. Monarch is built for people with busy lives. If you put up organizing your finances, Monarch is for you. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, and you can see clear data visuals, smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. And if you realize, hey, I'm not spending or saving as much as I thought, Monarch can help you notice that, and you can get the financial opportunities that have been slipping through the cracks. You can figure that out with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONCollege. So we're going to talk UCLA quarterbacks in a moment and the Nico drama. But first, let's kind of go back into who could be a good hire for UCLA, maybe at the group of 5 level. Steve, who do you have in mind?
Well, I think you instantly look at a guy like Matt Entz. I know we're talking about coordinators, and I think that those guys would be excellent if they got the chance to coach at UCLA. Tony White, Will Stein, Coach Lynn, guys that have certainly proved that they deserve the opportunity to be in the corner office. But a guy like Matt Entz has just historically been a terrific coach that did a great job during his time at North Dakota State, winning 2 national championships. I thought he came over to USC and helped change the mindset and culture of a Trojans defense that played at a much higher level last year than the year before. And he's at Fresno State right now, 3-1 in his new post. He is someone that has played championship caliber football that, in my opinion, has a little bit of Lance Leipold in him. And that's another guy that if I was UCLA, I would try and go after. Kansas head coach Lance Leipold, who was a national champion winning coach in Wisconsin on the Division III level, that went to Buffalo and consistently won, and then came to Kansas and has made them a competitive program consistently. Those are guys that I think would bring the consistent mindset that you need daily at a place like UCLA to win at a high level.
And the big thing is maybe the next coach just has to avoid drama, right, Steve? As Deshaun, he brought in Nico, trying to make the big swing. Do you think that drama, the camp, all that led to UCLA stumbling so far out of the gate? And has Nico really been built up as what he's been, a 5-star quarterback, and it hasn't really looked like it on the field?
Well, I think Nico's a talented quarterback that if you have him in your program for a couple of years, he's definitely a chip that you can build around and win at a high level. But when you're changing your quarterback from spring football into fall camp, that's hard transition for a football team that didn't have much of a foundation anyway, where Aguilar was able to step in at Tennessee because that's a program that played in the college football playoff last year that has a culture and a mindset where he just fell in line and is just able to jump in and be himself and play. At UCLA, it wasn't the same situation for Nico. And so obviously the results have not been there. If you'd stick Nico on Ohio State's team, he'd look a hell of a lot better, or Oregon's team, and he'd be playing better at Tennessee. So UCLA was able to land him out of the portal, and that's a good piece, but it rocked any kind of continuity that they had with Aguilar coming out of spring football. And I think it's hard to plug and play that position as much as any for a program that was struggling the year before. New coordinator also, so there's a lot of change. New coordinator that built the relationship with the guy that they had out of the portal. And now all of a sudden that's gone. Those 15 practices of work, any conversations you had, all the little things that go into preparing for a game in a season, the film study, the conversation, the dialogue, anything you did in March and April was completely erased because you just brought in a brand new quarterback to run your offense that you're paying a lot of money for, with no continuity, no relationship with the coaching staff. And so that stuff shows up over the course of a 60-minute ball game, and you don't make enough plays to win. But Nico's a good player, and he's a good prospect. For Tennessee, they were still waiting on their return on investment. He was getting paid to not play for a while. And so anything less than delivering college football playoff wins and a Heisman Trophy, in my opinion, he was being well compensated for that, and they were waiting on an ROI. And so when you go in there and you're looking for more, we're looking for more.
Yeah, I mean, he was treated well at Tennessee until he left.
He was treated well, and he was going to be their guy, and they are going to have a chance to win the national championship. But they didn't see it that way on the other side. And there's always two sides to the story. But I think what it came down to is they asked for more and didn't get it.
And we're seeing how that's playing out live with Joey Aguilar, who is clearly a capable quarterback, especially when you can run the ball and protect your QB. That just helps you so much. And imagine if Nico just had a solid O-line and a solid run game. That just changes every dynamic as a quarterback. In 2026.
And even he's got some growing pains at Tennessee, too. It's not like he played a perfect game on Saturday, but he's going to get better as the season comes along because he's in a much better situation. And Nico is very talented, and if the right head coach comes in and he gets a full off season, strength and conditioning, meetings, classroom time, understanding this is how we're attacking defenses. This is what we're doing. These are your personnel around you. These are your offensive linemen, for him to get to know those guys, lift weights with them, build relationships with them, because that's how you win football games. Everybody pulling together, supporting each other, rallying around each other instead of just being plug and play. And so Nico's got a lot of talent, needs the right head coach, needs the right coordinator, play caller, but needs to just be in a situation where he can have a full off season, get on the same page, understand what we're trying to do and what we're attacking and how we're going to play on Saturdays.
And the big thing is, obviously, is it appeasing Nico or is it appeasing Nico's camp? The thing is, in 2026, if you wanted to kind of dive into it, do you think he plays well enough to increase his NFL draft stock? I personally don't think he can really recover that at this moment. He goes to another school in the portal, or, surprise of it all, year two of Nico in 2026. Which of those three options is the most likely?
Well, I think, again, Nico's a talented guy that a lot of teams would be lucky to have as their quarterback. His situation will be the same next year of it's going to be a new coach, whether it's at UCLA or whatever, But I think more development on the college level in a system that allows him to play to his strengths with familiarity.
What would you say the strengths are?
Well, we think, he was a 5-star number one player at his position in the country, man. And I thought he had some leadership qualities too when he was in high school. And I thought he was an exciting player, but he can obviously throw the football all over the yard. He can extend plays and he's just he was a plug and play quarterback for UCLA this year with not the best supporting cast and certainly not the best system around him to maximize his abilities.
And the big thing is, can UCLA hire that guy? Is that an attractive thing for a head coach coming in? Hey, I'm going to come in. I will convince Nico to stay. Or do you think just get it clean and bring in a new clean slate? Go with the youngster, go with the portal. What would you think is a better move there?
Well, in today's era, there's nothing guaranteed with your roster. So whoever UCLA hires, the things that they can show the new hire is that they're invested in the program and they're going to give you every resource to be as successful as possible, from upgrading facilities to making sure you have the funds to compete, to put together a roster that can play competitive football in the Big Ten, that you can pay the coaching salaries to attract good assistant coaches to your staff, good strength coaches to your staff. That's all UCLA can promise a coach right now. And then it's up to the coach to create an environment that players want to play in.
Can this 2026 class be recovered? Obviously, there's been at least 6 decommits since the Foster firing. A big name, maybe Micah Cham-Smith, could be kept if he's convinced to stay, but he's all the way from Florida, and Florida State is a hot program. Miami's a hot program. Is there a way to recover this class? Or is it you got to just hit the portal and then focus on the 27s with the new coach?
Well, certainly depending on how quickly they can get that head coach named after the season, you have a chance to make some waves. And then there's people in the administration that can do their best to help keep the guys committed in the fold. I mean, look, talking compensation, talking rev share, talking NIL, and talking about the future of the program and how you're going to get the right coach in here and have faith and being honest with families about candidates and where it's at and who could potentially be the next football coach of this team. Maybe you can salvage the class, but that's just not as important as making the right hire and finding the guy that's going to maximize your program moving forward. Someone that's going to be in complete control of every part of the program, from offense to defense to talent acquisition to strength and conditioning. They're going to have their thumb on it and making sure it's a well-oiled machine.
And that's the big thing. UCLA's got to get the right guy. First and foremost, get the energizer, get the confident dude. They're out there. I feel like there's plenty of solid candidates out there. But if you screw this up again, you could set UCLA back for many years to come, which they already kind of did, hiring Deshaun Foster, unfortunately. But that is
more of the same, Zach, not set them back. It's more of the same, unfortunately.
Yeah, just unfortunate. That's just where it is. And we'll see how it plays out and how that affects recruiting from here on forth. That is Steve Wiltfong, On Three Rivals Vice President, National College Football Recruiting and Transfer Portal. Thanks for joining the show, Steve. Thanks for all your knowledge.
Nope, absolutely. Thanks for having me on. We'll do it after the next coach is hired.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll see. I think a dear friend, Brian Smith, said, hey, I can tell you right away if UCLA is going to be good or bad if UCLA hires the right guy or the wrong guy. And I was like, well, I guess we'll find out.
Get Matt Entz to Westwood.
That there it is. Matt Entz to Westwood. Steve said it first here. Steve Wiltfong. I'm Zach Anderson-Yoxheimer. You've been listening to Locked On UCLA. Thanks for tuning in. Like, comment, subscribe, download. This has been the show. Go Bruins.